I've been better.
You know what? I guess we've all been better considering the COVID-19 situation, but I guess got to move forward.
Yeah, and I was about to ask you how like the semester has been treating you, but last I remember you're on sabbatical, so technically speaking, semester's not been treating you because you're not teaching, but like I guess it's better than having to like set foot on a university, you know?
Well, so you are correct in that I am on sabbatical, and I guess the interesting thing is that while I'm on sabbatical for the academic year, I myself am working on a podcast project. So that's my sabbatical project, during the course of the, what we're finishing up is the fall semester and now rolling into the spring semester. So much like yourself, I'm using the virtual technology that's out there that enables us to have conversations. And I will do that until the end of the semester. And, again, we keep our fingers crossed as it relates to COVID that we can all be back on campus in the fall. But in the meantime, keeping busy with the podcast project. It's going well. And we move right along.
Now, do you think, was your sabbatical like determined long before the semester started, or because I noticed like when the university was preparing for like fall 2020,
right?
The part of their logistical part of their planning in terms of logistics was like it seemed like handing a bunch of professors sabbaticals so that they could like cut their budget down a little bit. What was your sabbatical like determined long before, or do you think this was like they handed to you like a month out or something?
Well, yeah, I don't know what the dynamics were kind of behind the scenes. What I do know is that these sabbaticals were made available, and I had started this podcast project last year, and it's a project that has me interviewing faculty, staff, students about the terrific work that's being done by these individuals on campus and beyond. Much of my focus has been on alumni at this point. So what I did was I put together a proposal. My background is in broadcast, in podcast, and it really speaks to the passion that I have for this type of storytelling, if you will. And I put together a proposal. It was accepted, and I'm working with the Alumni Association, for example, interviewing alumni who are doing really interesting work outside the University of Hartford, of course, because they're graduates. And I would say at this point, I've been producing a podcast every 2 weeks or so. Not a hard and fast deadline. Schedules have to be met, as you know, with the podcast that you're doing. Arranging for interviews and conversations and discussions while working through individual schedules, while working through COVID. But it's I'm really pleased. It's been working out really well, and I've also had a chance to work with students along the way. 2 students in the fall semester, which is just coming to an end, they're working with me as independent studies. I've got one student who's working as a researcher and a writer, and I have another student who's working with me on the on the technical production, mostly post-production associated with the podcast. And once the spring semester rolls around, I'll be working with 2 more students. So really happy to be working with students at the same time on this project. And if I had to do the math off the top of my head, I guess I've done 6 interviews so far. I guess I'd be shooting for another 6 in the spring semester, and working on a production schedule that again is a little loosey goosey based on everybody's schedules, but it's been working out really well so far.
And for this podcast, what would you say is like the mission behind it?
Well, for the the podcast series at this point has been primarily focused on alumni and the work that they have been doing since graduating from the University of Hartford. So, one of my more recent interviews, for example, was with Jim Ford, who is an actor and a stunt double. And he shared some amazing stories with me about the work that he does as an actor, as a stunt double, and the folks in Hollywood that he has worked with. So that was a conversation. I guess we chatted for about 30 minutes. The podcasts have ranged between 20 and 30 minutes. Another recent conversation I had with Michelle Hart, who is a healthcare worker in New York State and very involved in the fight against COVID, and an essential worker there. And the just the stories that she shared with me about just what people are dealing with when it comes to COVID-19. It's I don't have to tell you, it's scary stuff. It continues to be scary. So, basically it's looking at work that the University of Hartford graduates have done. And really at that point, just, I guess if you use the old radio analogy, just turning on the red light for the microphones to go on and having a conversation about that.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know if you remember how we met, but I think it was initially because I was trying to find an internship and you happened to be internship coordinator for the School of Communication.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I think last semester there was I was trying to there was a grant that was like accepting applications, and I wanted to like get in on that so I could like start like get some of that money to like get equipment and like start my own podcast.
Yes, I recall, and obviously you're well on your way.
Yeah, and but then I think like I submitted everything in a timely manner and such with all the things I needed that were required of me. But then I remember I got a message from the dean saying like, well, it seems like all this stuff you're asking for is like already readily available in the School of Communication. So they didn't really have a incentive to say, grant me the grant. And because that was, and I guess it's long, that opportunity is long gone. And so I think it's safe to admit now that I was really just looking to score free gear.
Okay.
And just because like, I'm a college student and like, I'm not like, I've chosen not to work all too much during my studies. And so I was trying to find an opportunity to like, I really wanted to get some, like for the longest time I've been using like a Zoom H4n for like whatever audio work I'm doing. And I was like, yeah, but I feel like it's about a bit outdated and I feel like I need something better. And I really wanted to get a Zoom H6 to really bump myself up in terms of audio quality. And so of course the opportunity came and went and I didn't score that. But I have since like gotten myself a unit, a Zoom H6 on my own, and along with actually a bunch of other stuff, including like an audio interface that I'm using to talk to you, some microphones, like more microphones, more than I had before, and also like more audio equipment, so to facilitate the like post-production process.
Right. I mean, that's the great thing I find about podcasting is you can, based on what your needs are as a podcaster, the technology is there. You can start small, if you will. You can build up with more equipment based on, what your needs are. And, we have the technology virtually to chat the way we're doing, right now, and the platform that you're using. And I guess at that point, it's just people who are interested in this platform, in this form of storytelling, have the opportunity to tell stories, and I guess seek out the appropriate technology, as I guess you did, in terms of what your needs were and what your needs are and might be going forward, sort of building around that platform, and then doing the work that you're doing in terms of the types of podcasts that you're creating. And again, it's a storytelling opportunity, and much of that is virtual these days because of COVID. But as I think as we're proving right now, the job can get done.
Yeah, and to I guess further reveal like that little my trying to surreptitiously score gear from the university. I actually started this podcast before I started talking to you about quote unquote starting a podcast.
Sure.
So because it was me trying to, again, like get better gear than I at the time had. So I remember trying to word my emails to you very specifically so that I technically wasn't lying when I would say like I'm starting, quote unquote, starting a podcast.
Right.
And then also I think there was one time I got really kind of scared that like we were meeting in your office and then Dr. Banks walked by and he said something about, I'm really sorry, I haven't like found the time to be on your podcast. And then I was like, I was like shaking in my boots, like, maybe Professor Hefter will interpret that as like I'm lining up guests for the podcast, not like I've already had a podcast.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, here we are chatting nonetheless.
Yeah, that's
and I couldn't help but notice. So we're chatting over an audio streaming platform, but you and I have some visuals at the same time, and I see a nice rack of guitars in the background, which has my curiosity because I'm a guitarist myself. So those are some guitars you got there up there.
Yeah. Thanks. I've got. If you're curious about what each and every one of these are, So from your perspective, from left to right, there's a ukulele.
Yeah.
Then there's a nylon string classical guitar.
Okay.
Which is a Cordoba C5 CE. Then next is a Epiphone Hummingbird Pro steel string acoustic guitar. After that is an Epiphone Dot. And then there's a Fender Telecaster.
Yeah.
And a Fender Precision Bass guitar.
Very nice. Very nice.
What kind of guitars do you have?
I have a Gibson SG, and I have a Telecaster as well, the Nashville Deluxe, the 3 pickup model. And I've been spending quite a bit of time during COVID kind of honing my guitar chops because I have the time. Yeah. And I used to own like your Dot, something similar. It was a D'Armand Starfire, so by Guild, the 335 style guitar, which I sold. I tend to trade around my guitars, and I'm kind of thinking I'd like that style guitar again. So it's just something that it's kind of on my radar, but that my 2 guitars of choice now are the SG and the Telecaster.
Nice. I'm always been curious about the SG because like it looks so like how an SG looks. It's like wow, and I see all these like all these players like like Angus Young or like Kerry Brownstein from Slater Kinney, and they play SGs. I'm like, and I look at how it's it's got that sound, but also like all these people who aren't necessarily like a particular type of guitar player, and they're all playing the same model SG, and it's like, oh, it's what I like in SG. Like, what part of the SG like do you think you enjoy?
Yeah, I used to play a Les Paul, which I liked, but it was an extremely heavy guitar. And so that was one of the guitars I moved around in order to make the SG purchase. And what I like most about the SG is the fact, because it's a double cutaway, the upper fret access is really good. It's a light guitar. I like the humbucking pickups that are on this particular guitar. They're the classic 57, so I love that sound. And I was doing some shopping around for an SG. This one has locking tuners. It came with the nice Gibson case. And I years ago I had a 1972 SG, again, which I traded around as I moved through the guitar market, and always liked the SG, and just decided I was going to pick another one up, and I did, and I do love that guitar. And the Telecaster came after that. I used to own a Fender Tele many years ago, and just thought, as a different sound, I'd like to pick up a Telecaster. So I did some homework and some research, and I like the 3 pickup Nashville Deluxe model. Picked up a Daphne blue one, which is kind of cool looking. At this point, those are the 2 guitars. And the other purchase that I made, which certainly helps while I'm playing solo, is a Digitech Trio Plus, which is basically a band in a box. So it enables me to get a bass line going and some drums going. And I've got 2 amplifiers, 2 small amps in my basement. So I've got my backing band thanks to the Trio and 1 amp, and I'm playing through the other amp. And it's fun. I mean, I miss playing in a band, but I guess in these COVID times, this is the next best thing.
Yeah. I like the way I chose like my guitar arsenal, you could say.
Yeah.
But like for the longest time I wanted to be like the guy with the least amount of gear ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like acoustic, electric, and like maybe that's it. But like because my first electric guitar was the Telecaster over there.
Okay.
Because I thought it's been around so long. It's like the solid body electric guitar, the first really successful one. And and part of that success comes from like the versatility, which is rooted in the design, which is so like dead simple, 1 tone, 1 volume knob, and just a single block of wood.
Right.
And I see like a lot of my like favorite players, like they all at least either lean on the Tele, or at least they have a Tele that like in their collection. I'm like, that's definitely the one I'm gonna get, the Telecaster. And for the most part, it is versatile. It does the job. It gets the job done. But that still means there's things that a solid body with single coil pickups, there's still a few things it probably can't really do.
Mm-hmm.
And so just recently, in the past week, I got that Epiphone Dot because like yourself, I did the homework. I'm like, okay, so the one like other than a solid body single coil guitar, which the Telecaster is like, that's the one for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to get would probably be like a Gibson ES335 semi hollow body humbucker pickups, but of course I can't afford that. So I'm like, okay, what's the not knockoff, but like the Epiphone, like the cheaper version of a 335? I'm like the Dot, totally the Dot, because so that it can fill out. Because I kind of think of it as the pickups are like on either end of a spectrum. There's the single coil over here, and then the humbuckers over here, and then maybe you could say the P90s are right up the middle.
Right.
So I was thinking, like, I already have the Telecaster. Now I just need a kind of like a semi-hollow or a hollow body with humbuckers over here. That's the Dot, and I got the Dot.
How do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
If anything, I think I might prefer it over the Tele because, like, the neck shape it feels more comfortable in my hand as opposed to a Tele.
Yeah, that's another reason why I like the SG. It's got a slim taper neck, and I just like a slimmer neck. Even the Telecaster that I got it's got a 12-inch radius fretboard, which is on the thin side. I tried some other tellies before, and I just found that the necks were just too much like baseball bats, which don't fit well in my hands. And I actually was trying the telly out while I was just looking at an amp, and I picked up the guitar because it was on, it was on the floor on display, and I had to play something through it. And I thought, wow, this guitar feels really good. But I was focused on the amp that day, and I bought the amp, but that telly was always in the back of my mind. And like you, I mean, the SG, the humbuckers, the fat sound, it does it really, really well. But, the Telecaster is just, that's another guitar beast, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you know what, I think it's time to diversify a little bit. So again, did my homework, which is half the fun of buying a new piece of gear. Settled on that. I tried the Baja Telly, which was nice too, but again, I thought I found the neck too wide. So I settled on the Nashville. Really happy with it. It's a heavier guitar, but hasn't created too many backbreaking moments at this point. So I think if I was going to get a third, and it may entirely be possible, it would be a 335 type guitar like you have. I think those are really special as well.
Yeah, I think part of what appeals to me about a 335 type guitar is like the neck shape, but also like I spent the longest time playing just acoustic guitar before I ever got into electric, and I like the way the body of an acoustic guitar sits against mine.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I play the telly, it's like it's a solid body guitar, so it's like it's just compacted, so it's like it just feels real small, and then it hangs down, like if I'm standing, it hangs down like way farther than I would like it to.
Right.
And so when I have the dot on my shoulder, it feels, because of the way the body is put together, it feels like an acoustic guitar sort of. Up in my in my arms. So it's like, this feels really nice. It fits like my arm's grip, if you could say that.
Yeah. Well, it's a bigger body, right? And it's I mean, it's basically a hollow body guitar. Yours probably has the kind of the slab in the middle of it to cut the feedback. But yeah, absolutely. It's funny you should say that, because one of the things I was toying with was getting an acoustic guitar, which I have not owned. I mean, the first guitar I got as a kid was an acoustic guitar, and I haven't played one since. But I thought, I don't know if I'm going to go for a variety of sound. Maybe I should look at that. So I started to do some homework on that. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to get an acoustic, maybe I should get one that's acoustic electric, at the same time. And so I started looking at that. And then I looked at other options. Godin Guitars makes a really nice acoustic electric. It's a one pickup, a P90. It's the Fifth Avenue, and I thought, well, that's kind of neat. But then it's I'm kind of getting back to the electric guitar side of things with kind of some acoustic nature to it. So I'm kind of a bit all over the map on that one. But I like the 335. If I was going to kind of pull a model out of a hat that I get just to get, would be probably, again, I'm more of a Gibson person than a Fender person, but I appreciate both guitars. It might be a Firebird. I think those are really neat guitars, but I don't know. I think that's just something that's on my wish list at this point.
Yeah, I think given my sensibilities of trying to not go broke, but also try to have as little gear as possible in quotes. I think I'm done. Like Telecaster done.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I think I would get is maybe like a better acoustic guitar.
Okay.
I fantasize about like a Martin Triple O.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Hummingbird, it's fine. I love it.
All right.
But sometimes sometimes I just don't feel like playing a Dreadnought because it feels a bit too like bulky or whatever.
Yeah.
And of course I would totally keep the Hummingbird as like the side acoustic or something, or the one that's not so precious as like if I were to get a Martin.
Right.
And but also maybe keep it in a different tuning, down a whole step or in an open tuning or something, as like a side acoustic.
Right. So you don't have a hankering for a Strat or a Les Paul?
No, I don't think so because like when I first started playing, like when I was thinking about getting an electric guitar, it was like I was thinking about what kind of player I am or what kind of player I would be.
Uh-huh.
And the Strat was like, well, I mean, I see a lot of people playing Strats, but it's like the number one association with the Strat is like Hendrix.
Uh-huh.
And then I think to myself like, well, I'm not very Hendrixy.
Right.
And like, I don't know, do I want to commit to a guitar like that when I'm not even really sure of my own identity yet as a guitarist?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, the SG is my number one, and when I was looking for a number two guitar, I mean, I like a Strat. I owned one years ago. It was one of the early Squires. It was a good guitar, and again, I traded around as I tend to do. But this time, when I went shopping, I didn't even look at a Strat. I kind of felt I wanted a Tele, and at that point, it was just finding the right one, which I found. But as you know, there are a lot of good guitars out there. PRS, the SC editions, those are reasonably priced. Gretsch makes a really good series as well. I mean, there are just so many good options out there, but budgets are budgets, and I only have so much space in my den, so I opted for the Tele. I'm glad I got it,
Yeah.
but the SG is what I love to pull out and crank out, and again with the Digitech Trio providing me a bit of a backing band during these COVID-19 times when sometimes you're looking for things to do. It's given me many hours of pleasure, and probably will continue to do so.
Yeah, and that's another that is another valid concern in terms of space. Like, for the longest time, I had just like a guitar stand that held three guitars set up like right directly behind me. Right? And as I like got more stuff, it was like I need more space. I can't like I had a single guitar stand I'm holding up to the camera right now, and then the one that held three that worked for like when all I had was like the Tele, an acoustic, a classical, and also another acoustic, which is gone now. And then I got like the bass. I'm like, oh, that's one more that I can't fit on the floor, and so I decided to like rearrange my room and put in that thing on the wall so I could hang my guitars on the wall.
That's great.
Yeah, and the thing it came with like 5 hangers, but of course you can slide them around every which way. So like I bet you can configure like maybe 7 things hanging from it is pushing it.
Right.
So. And I was like, cool, that totally fits everything now. Everything's in its right place.
Plus, I see you've got keyboards as well, so you got some gear there. My problem is, I'll walk into a store that sells musical instruments, and if you're like me, you're like a kid in a candy shop, right? I mean, it's just I could spend hours in there, and if you're not careful, you're going to make a purchase that maybe you don't really need to make. But I don't play professionally, and I just the reality is how many guitars do I need, or can I even use at once? But I still keep busy with it. I still love to play. I've been playing for a long time. These days, actually, I find myself, I can't read music, so I find that I'm limited in what I can play along the fretboard. And so I've been going on YouTube to check out videos and things like that, and scales and stuff like that. I must admit, I don't have much patience for it. But I think, well, if I'm going to play more than just the same blues runs that I like to play, I should probably try to expand my palette and see what else is out there. But then, the conversation gets to a certain level, and it's like, no, okay, I got to shut this down and just jam, because I can only take it so far. But it's always been fun.
Yeah, I'm curious to know when you started playing.
I've been playing. I got my first, because I had an acoustic, and I was a young boy, and I didn't really know what to do with it. But I'd say my first serious guitar I purchased when I was about 17 or 18. So I've been playing for a long time, many decades. And, I remember the moment like it was yesterday. I walked into, living in Montreal at the time, I walked into a music store and I sort of knew what I wanted, but I wasn't sure. I did some homework and what I wanted was a Hagstrom guitar. And those are still being made, but back then they were being made in Sweden. And I knew they were guitars with slim necks and they played well. And, I tried a few out and, I wasn't any good. I could play some chords and I thought I knew what I wanted. So I found a red Hagstrom guitar and I picked that up and I picked up a trainer amp, 30-watt trainer amp, which weighed 1,000,000 pounds because all tubes. I should have kept it. I didn't. At that point I, got together with some guys and, garage band stuff and things like that. And from the Hagstrom, I traded that for a Telecaster, and then I went from the Tele to my 1972 SG, traded that for a Les Paul Custom. I got rid of the Custom. I got a Strat. I went from the Strat to my Guild Starfire, and from there, from the Starfire, I went to the Les Paul. That was a 70s tribute with mini humbuckers. That was a nice guitar. Again, it weighed a ton. And then I guess my next step was probably the current SG. So, I've always been, I guess, a casual guitarist, a garage band kind of guitarist, getting together with just friends to make some noise. We used to rent out a studio space for a number of years when I was, I guess, more into it. I've always loved it. It's something that keeps me busy these days, which is saying something.
I think we both started around the same age playing because I didn't get into guitar until I was 17 and a senior in high school, and which was like 7 or 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I myself I didn't really play with friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends who were musicians, but like they've been playing for so long.
Right.
They had years on me. So like we would try to jam, but all I had was like an acoustic guitar and it didn't really make sense.
Right.
And when I was playing, it was mostly me in my like staying in my room and like trying to like figure out guitar, and to the point where I'm such a nerd for like the nuts and bolts of how things work, like that, and theory interested me.
Right.
So I was learning like music theory.
Yeah.
Actually, I got into piano a little bit right before I got into guitar. So I was glad I had a keyboard with me, and so I would use like the keyboard to study theory, and while also concurrently figuring out guitar,
right,
and like trying to translate the knowledge between the instruments.
Yeah, I wish I had done that. I just didn't. Like you, I tried to figure out the guitar, and I guess eventually did. But again, if I go online and look at lessons and pentatonic scales and diminished frets and everything, my eyes just glaze over. So it's a bit much for me to comprehend at this point. But it does limit me as a guitarist. But I still love playing. I mean, what music do you enjoy?
I think when I first started, it was basically Bob Dylan and the Beatles.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But now it's grown into like I'm interested in playing jazz guitar, and like in a way, I guess you could say classical, because like the coolest thing I think that you can do on guitar is like take full songs and arrange them to be played instrumentally on one guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very cool. There is Pat Metheny has a CD. It's a number of years now, probably at least 10 years since he recorded. It's called One Quiet Night. It's playing solo with, I think it's baritone guitar. It's just marvelous. For me, I listen to somebody play guitar like that, and I'm thinking, Like, why am I bothering? But I know why. It's fun and I enjoy it. But
Yeah.
I like blues guitar. I admittedly like to crank it up and get those pickups wailing and
Yeah.
just have some fun with it.
Do you was blues like the thing that got you into playing guitar, or was it other music?
I think so. Younger and growing up, I was always into music even before I started playing. So, back then, the Stones, Free was a popular band at that point. Of course, the Beatles, the Kinks, Robin Trower. So I always gravitated towards guitarists, Jeff Beck, Eric
Yeah.
Clapton, and
Mhm.
then Albert King, BB King, and I just kind of grew to love that music and started to play that music. And a lot of it's 12-bar blues. So for
Mhm.
somebody who doesn't read music, that tended to be somewhat easier for me to kind of wrap my head around while I was enjoying the music as well.
Yeah.
Um, so nowadays, again, it's been a while, unfortunately, for COVID, but I'd get together with friends. Before COVID, I had a kind of a semi-regular jam session going with a bunch of friends. And all right, let's play some blues and A. You didn't need much more than that, where you can kind of wrap your head around a tune and just have some fun with it. So yeah, I've always loved it. And actually, these days, despite COVID, I host a blues show on WWUH, which is the public alternative radio station on the campus of the University of Hartford. So, if your listeners happen to be handy to the radio, or you can catch the show archived as well, Mondays between 9 and midnight. I'm still producing the show remotely. I just play 3 hours of the blues and really enjoy it.
Have you ever thought about so when you are doing producing the show, it's you like spinning blues records, right?
Yes.
So so have you ever thought of like doing performances,
In terms of me performing or playing live performances?
like having guests, or you performing, or you jamming with guests,
Yeah,
or
I've funny you should say that. I've thought about that. I have to say that. So I'm from Montreal, and I was on the radio in Montreal for many years, and I worked for a radio station that was a news talk radio station. It was not a music station, but I would bring kind of certain elements of that to the shows that I did host. So one example would be. One year before Jeff Beck came to Montreal. He came to Montreal one summer, again, must be 10 or 12 years ago, right at the time of the Montreal International Jazz Festival, which takes place in the summer. And I arranged, through his publicist, I arranged an interview with Jeff Beck, which for me was just a thrill because he's just such a master. And
yeah,
it was just neat to talk to him before he came to Montreal. And other times I've actually had guests in my studio during shows that I've hosted for them to play live. And that's always been a treat. Although I can't say that I actually have thought much about, bringing in some performers to play with me. Quite frankly, I'm not sure what that would sound like. What I sound like in my head, but
yeah,
yeah, it would be fun. There's no question about it. I've worked in studios that are big enough and have enough microphones to be able to
yeah.
accomplish that.
Now hold on, you can't just gloss over the fact that you interviewed Jeff Beck and not tell me how that went.
That was great. I mean, it was it was out of the blue. It was many years ago. I still have that interview saved somewhere in my computer, and I just reached out to his publicist in the UK, and he was coming to Montreal, so I thought there might be some interest in having him on the air with me. And sure enough, I got an email back saying that Jeff would be happy to talk to you. And then, as you know, in podcasting, at that point, it's dealing with logistics and time and place and things like that. It wasn't a live interview. I recorded it, pre-recorded it, and we talked about everything from his first guitar to his love of cars to the fact that he's was at that time and still would be a two-time member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but in two incarnations. I guess his first as Cream, and then subsequently as a solo artist. And
Wait, do you mean as part of the Yardbirds or?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember if he was inducted as because of his work with the Yardbirds or Cream. I can't recall off the top of my head.
Because I'm fairly certain Jeff Beck wasn't part of Cream.
Oh,
I think that was Eric Clapton.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going somewhere else in my mind. Yeah, it would be the Yardbirds. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, so it would have been with the Yardbirds, of course. You'd be right. And then his solo work, some great albums on his own, of course. And it was very easy to talk to. And we just, it was kind of like talking shop, guitar stuff and car stuff and his love of music and how he got started and playing with the people that he's played with and the fact that, he's, I saw him in Montreal, actually. Was it during that trip to Montreal prior to my interview with him? It might have been, or it might have been a subsequent appearance in Montreal. But he came to Montreal. He played at Place des Arts, and he played. It was the time where he put out the Live at Ronnie Scott's album, and that was basically the album that he played live in Montreal. And it was just, it was pretty magical. I would say that would be one of my guitar highlights as a member of the audience. Another one would be I saw Johnny Winter in the early to mid 70s. He came to Montreal with King Crimson.
Nice.
A huge John Fogerty fan. I've seen him a couple of times post his Creedence Clearwater Revival days. And I've seen a lot of jazz as well. Bill Frisell, John Schofield. It's just when I think about it and relive those moments with you, I consider myself sort of blessed with the opportunity to see these magnificent world-class talents play the guitar, and I suppose that's kind of what inspires me to be, the rather mediocre guitarist that I am.
Yeah, and I hope to one day, I don't know, like maybe this is like wishful thinking, but maybe if my podcast, quote unquote, gets big enough, I could maybe like get a guest of that caliber on, because like in your case, when like you interviewed Jeff Beck, it was like you were working for a radio station and like that looks legit, right? That looks like a legit gig,
right? And
then I'm over here like, hey, do you want to come on my thing that sounds made up?
Well, but you have to realize that the broadcasting world has changed a lot since those days, right? And now you and I are taking the advantage of the technology that's available to us to have a conversation that, when I was just starting my career, because, podcasts are a fairly recent phenomenon. In order to have that type of conversation, a conversation that we're having now, you had to have it on the air, like you said, working at a radio station, and those were the callers, and that was part of the pitch to try to get the artist on the air. But podcasts have, they've changed the playing field, and I would, quite frankly, I would encourage you to reach out to anybody who you would like to interview and basically just see where it goes. I mean, because this is the audio related world that we live in now, and it's really big, it's really rich in content and opportunity. And but it is true. I mean, I worked at a radio station. And again, I love to talk to guitarists. And I interviewed John Schofield. I interviewed Russell Malone, another great guitarist. Harry Manx, who's a tremendous talent. Mostly, now that I think about it, I often hosted a radio show in Montreal right around the time of the Montreal International Jazz Festival. And I would just look at the slate of performers who were scheduled to come to Montreal, and I'd pick my spots and say, oh, well, Jeff Beck's coming to town. Oh, Colin James is coming to town. I'd like to see if I can interview him. And, I had some success at that. And I would go, forward with your ideas and put it out there. It's easy enough these days kind of to find the publicity-related people who presumably take care of these requests. And then, just take it from there.
Yeah, and do you think, like in terms of my show, I wouldn't say I really interview people.
Uh-huh.
So at least, or maybe when, like, if I were to contact like someone's PR team, I would say interview, because that gets a point across. That's like the simplest term to let them know what kind of thing it kind of is.
Uh-huh.
But like, say if I were to sit down with Jeff Beck, I probably wouldn't be interviewly like asking him like the questions he's heard in every interview.
Right.
Like I would more just literally have a casual conversation. I would just be like asking him what he had for breakfast and then move on from there. Probably touching on like big things, maybe not even. And but do you think but that brings up the like this idea of, do you think like a podcast, because it's not being quote unquote regulated like a radio show would be, is there a way to like be too niche? Like not too recently, I podcasted an instructor of mine who's an audio engineer, and I would say like 70% of it was just talking about gear and like equipment.
Right.
And like that would probably go over people's heads, people who are not familiar with that kind of industry. So do you think like a conversation like that would be like too niche?
Well, I guess some of that might depend on how you market yourself and how you market your podcast. I think that having a certain subject that you're interested in, that you're proficient in, that you like to talk about, quite frankly, that's a powerful conversation to have, and it may be with more of a limited audience, but I think there's something to be said about that, as opposed to maybe casting too broad a net and trying to cover as many bases as you can without really kind of digging a little deeper into the specifics of what it is that you want to talk about. You look at, I guess the parallel would be in radio. Radio stations have formats, right? And the formats are all blues, all jazz, classic rock, album oriented, whatever the case may be. And when you look at that, by virtue of that, you're already looking at a certain niche audience, right? You can't be all things to all people. And I think the parallel for a podcast would be, I think fundamentally what I would do if I was going to establish my own podcast would be, I think I'd want to talk about what I love and what I know and what I hope is of interest to listeners, and then get the word out, and hopefully you get some traction out there, and sharing your podcast on social media, and just kind of getting the word out there. But I guess to answer your question, from my perspective, I would encourage you to kind of speak to what you're interested in, what you love, what you're passionate about. I could see right away. I know our listeners don't have the benefit of the visuals, but I saw half a dozen guitars hung up over your left shoulder, and I love guitar too, and we've probably spoken about 40 minutes about that. And that's a conversation that I suppose at its heart would appeal most to guitarists, but maybe not. So I guess to answer your question, I would encourage you to search out those specific avenues and areas of interest. Will you get as many listeners at the end of the day? Maybe not. And then further to another point that you brought up, having a conversation, with anybody, artists that you might want to have kind of on the air, and I'm using air quotes here on your podcast. I think at the end of the day, it's still an interview, right? It's still a conversation. Questions are being asked, but you come from a perspective of kind of less of maybe sort of the nuts and bolts of questions that might be expected and anticipated in a certain interview, and yours is more of a kind of an open, holistic approach to just generating conversation that's interesting, and that's great. Because one thing you'll want to do, I think, is when you reach out to performers that you'd like to interview, and there will be performers who will come on the air with you. I'm convinced of that. You want to let them know, they'll want to know, okay, what's this podcast all about, and to get a sense of where the conversation will go. But I would definitely encourage you to, it might not be Jeff Beck right off the bat, but it might be, I don't know, maybe a kind of a regional area guitarist who's doing great stuff on the local scene or something, and then all of a sudden you've got some interviews under your belt, some conversations under your belt within this genre. But I'd encourage you to go for it for sure.
Yeah. Well, in terms of my in my podcast, it's like if you were to look at a website, it's a very flippant tone.
Uh-huh.
In fact, the name of the show is The Podcast,
Right.
with Benson Ty.
Right.
And so, and the reason for that is because I don't want to treat this more as more than what it is,
Uh-huh.
because I don't conduct interviews. I conduct conversations. I just, the tagline for the show on the website is, I talk to people and record it. I talk to them. That's about it.
Right.
And, it's just that, and because it is my show, I'm the only person who works on it.
Uh-huh.
It's filtered through my sensibilities,
Uh-huh.
which means if I have an audio engineer on, we're going to nerd out on like gear.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen, because that's our common ground.
Right.
But also because like we're, but like my worries are about, I mean, I guess not really my worry, because like in the end, I don't really care what happens, because I'm not making money off this.
Right.
So it's not going to be too big. But like, sometimes there are episodes where, like the one with the audio engineer, where like it gets so technical and nerdy that like, unless you're also in that world, you're probably not going to want to listen to that,
Right. But then you have to consider where the listener is coming from and who the listener is. So, I'm going to use the radio format example. On my blues show, I love to play blues guitarists, and I'm sure I have listeners who that's all they want to hear. And I have other listeners who maybe get tired of it. And so be it. But I bring the show to the air kind of from my perspective, the way you do on your podcast. And if you've got somebody who you're talking to who and you're nerding out on gear, I think that you're going to have a certain subset of listeners who are going, yeah, this is exactly the kind of information that I want. And you'll have other listeners who are saying, okay, I'm getting lost in the weeds. Right. And if you had a conversation with this gear expert, but it was at a very high level and maybe none of it was about gear, you'd probably have people listening who think, oh, this is cool. This is just a fun conversation. And you'll have other people who want to have that nitty gritty conversation about gear thinking, like, why are they talking about what they had for lunch? I want to know what, what the best USB mic is on the market. Right. So I guess you can please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. And I was always somebody on the air who went in the direction that I wanted to go in while hosting a show, but I guess always keeping the listener in mind as well. And hopefully both sides of that equation would meet in the middle, and people at the end of the day, would be interested. But I don't know. From my perspective, the conversation would center around, what I'm passionate about, what's interesting to me, and what I think could be of interest to my listeners, and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, like, I'm doing this for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it for me.
Sure.
And if other people happen to listen, like, that's cool too. And if in the when it comes to free entertainment, you don't have to listen to it. If
Right.
you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, using the radio analogy, you could always turn it off or flip the channel, right?
Yeah.
And that exists in the podcast world as well. I mean, the beauty of the podcast, of course, is that you don't listen to it in real time, and it's there for you whenever you like. Radio, of course, traditionally being live in real time, and now more radio program is being put online and podcast, if you will. But your show is there, and the show drops on Monday afternoon or whenever it is that it ends up going live on the web, and then it's there. I mean, people can listen to it for the first half hour and then pick it up after dinner and listen to the rest of it, or whatever the case may be. It's just, again, to me it's storytelling, and I've told stories for a long time in my career as a journalist and as a broadcaster, and podcasting has just opened up so many avenues and opportunities for individuals who are passionate, have something to say, and want to say it. And I think it's great.
Yeah. And do you think like when your sabbatical ends, do you plan to keep doing like podcasting projects?
Yes, I'd like to. I mean, really, most of the podcast work that I do is related to the work that my students do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, last spring, before COVID hit, I was teaching a couple of courses of note. One was a sports-related course called the Sports Beat, and it had my students cover the Hartford Wolfpack, the hockey team, the American Hockey League team that plays out of the Excel Center in downtown Hartford. And that's what we and the students did as a class. They covered that hockey team. That was their beat during the semester. And part of the content that they produce was a podcast about the team in the American Hockey League and maybe what's happening in the National Hockey League. So we would go into the studio in the Harry Jack Ray building downstairs near the TV studio, and students would be in there and planning their show, planning their program to a group. Much different dynamic than a solo podcast or a one-on-one conversation. When you've got four individuals, who have something to contribute, there needs to be some structure there. So we'd have that conversation, but that was part of the product they produced. And another class that I taught in the spring was a podcasting class, again, groups of four. And as it turned out, many of my students in that class are sports fans, and many of them touched on sports subjects. But then again, some of them talked football, basketball. I mean, it was kind of, they had that free reign to bring the topics to the table for the podcast. I had one group of four. Their podcasts were on cold murder cases, and they attacked a different one week to week, and they set the stage and talked about the cases and things like that. And that's been so rewarding for me, to be able to share my knowledge with my students and get into the studio. And again, because of podcasting, I think the roots of podcasting, I think it's safe to say, would be the radio broadcast, right? Storytelling. And that's what's being done every day. And we're doing it right now. So yeah, I have both feet firmly planted in the podcasting world. And I've had a chance to talk to a number of my students and University of Hartford students about some of the work that I've done and the interests that I have. And it's a joy to have the conversation with you.
When you're teaching these podcasting classes, how much of it is, say, like teaching kids how to use equipment, and what kind of equipment is there to use?
Yeah, it's less about that. Although for both my sports beat class, well, maybe actually it was the podcasting class in the spring semester, I had a student work with me as an independent study student who was behind the board and handling the technical aspects of production. So we've got a board in that studio, 4 microphones. We were recording on Audacity, which is a pretty handy software editing and recording tool. And I'd work with that student on the production and the post production. But as far as the classroom was concerned, they didn't have to work on the technical aspects of the podcast. What I wanted them to work on would be things like, mic placement, right? What happens when you get too close to a mic? What happens when you're too far from the mic? What happens when you turn your head, right? And the format that each group of 4 students would want to consider before they even turned on the microphone. So who's going to open the show? How are you going to transition through the show? How long is the show going to be? How are you going to close the show? So it was more the format and structure of each podcast that I tried to stress with my students. But as far as the content was concerned, I mean, if I had a group of 4 students who wanted to talk sports and they wanted to talk about the NFL draft on a particular week, hey, go for it. Just consider the formatics and the logistics associated with the show. And then have that conversation.
Yeah, because like when I first got the idea of doing a podcast, like the easy part, like in terms of just talking to people, that's easy. You talk to someone, right? But the most interesting, most finicky part was me trying to figure out the production, the technical side.
Uh-huh.
Like okay, I know there are microphones involved. What else?
Right.
And like you need like some kind of thing to record into. I'm like, okay, yeah, and like tracing the signal, you could say, to all the things I would need to like make this palatable in terms of recording.
Make it work.
And yeah, and like it was also my, like, doing the podcast was also my push to learn about recording, because you would think as a musician I might have an idea, but I didn't, you know, and it was what really I forced myself to learn about it. And because when I think about like the like science and structure of like recording equipment, it's not intuitive. And that's also why like I put it off, because like that sounds like something that's so technical I could never figure it out.
Right.
And I feel like maybe it might be beneficial to like at least give people like the tiniest crash course into how recording equipment works, so that like if they do decide after like taking a podcasting class with you, they might go into it too, like get their own gear and like really try to figure it out.
I mean, we'd have a high-level conversation about that. And in fact, since my spring semester, I've had a number of students kind of go off on their own and produce podcasts. I've got one student who has a kind of a country western podcast, and he's interviewed musicians. I've got another group of 3 students. I've been on their show to do a sports podcast. So I guess we do have a high-level conversation, but even the conversation that you'd have with yourself about the technical aspects of it, you'd still be having the conversation about, so I know you've got music at the start of your podcast, right? You've got to think about, okay, what piece of music am I going to use, right? The name of the podcast, how long will each podcast run? So there's a lot kind of to the process associated with putting a show together. And again, I I know we use the word podcast, but I like to use the word show, because when our conversation wraps up, we will have, you will have a show to present to your listeners via the podcast format. And you had to determine, I can see your microphone, your cable, it's going into some gear, you're recording it somehow. We were working on a platform to be able to have this conversation in the first place. And I'm still learning too. I mean, there's so much technology out there. It's just unbelievable. But it's kind of fun at the same time just to learn what is out there, right? For sure.
Yeah, and the one thing I have to admit is that when I first contacted you about being on the show, part of it was because he produces podcasts, he teaches classes about podcasting, he's probably got gear, and then you reply to me, I have a blue Yeti USB mic. I'm like, then it occurred to me, oh wait, that's right, probably all the gear he uses is probably like property of the university.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's actually more gear than I would need on my own. But as you'd know, a good quality USB mic that plugs right into your computer, you can start recording at least on your own right away. There's a program out there called Clean Feed. It's a virtual recording platform that does a pretty good job of recording two-way conversations like the ones we're having. It's Wi-Fi dependent, so you never quite know what you're going to get at the end of the day. But my home setup is pretty basic. But I made the investment on the Blue Yeti, and even at that, I was doing my homework on what are the higher quality, reasonably priced microphones that are out there. And I love it because it looks great, and it's got a solid bass, and it's got good audio quality, and I can plug my headphones right into it, and there's no lag, and it does the job. So again, that's the thing about podcasting. I mean, maybe not so much now, but when people can share the same room, and if we're in the same room, and if we just have one cell phone between us, we can have a conversation running on voice memos or whatever, and all of a sudden you've got a podcast, right? So you can go as minimal as you like in terms of the technology, or as as fancy as you like, or you feel you need to get. And that's another neat thing about doing this kind of work, the opportunities that are available to you based on your needs when it comes to the technology.
Yeah, I think because, well, before the pandemic, I always insisted on like in person, doing podcasts in person.
Yeah.
One, because I like the feeling of live conversation.
Yeah.
But also so I could be in charge of the recording, like use my own equipment. And, now that people can't really meet anymore, despite my reluctance, I've been moving into doing remote recordings. And I mean, I've done a couple now with like people who don't have like, say, access to decent microphones or recording equipment. Like people like yourself, or who just have like some Apple earbuds, and it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's to some people it might not seem like that big of a deal, but like this has been me taking the leap to see if it can work. Like,
you think?
Because of for the past few months, it's been me like talking to like friends of mine who are like musicians and stuff who do have recording equipment, because I really did not want to sacrifice the sound quality. And now that now that I've been doing this for a few episodes with guests who might have a minimal setup like this, I have to admit it's not terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you can get, I would say, serviceable audio just speaking into your microphone that is embedded in your laptop. It might not be what I would call, the term like studio quality, right? But it would depend, I guess, on what you're looking for as the host, and the bar that you have set when it comes to what it sounds like at the end of the day. Never mind the sort of the nature of the conversation, but the nature of the audio quality itself. But again, most times if you're just talking into your computer onto that little microphone that's built into the side of it, it's usually fine. But certainly it's not going to give you the audio quality that you would get being in a studio that we could be in together, which we can't do these days, of course. And B, although Skype and FaceTime and Zoom are all great platforms, as you say, there's something to be said about being in a studio together and having that dynamic in play while you're having a conversation. But I think the technology is pretty terrific, and I think it's enabling a lot of us as podcasters to be able to podcast. And even in radio, a lot of the interviews I did when I was working news side, I'd call somebody on the phone from the radio station from a little booth, and it was somebody who I wanted to interview, and I'd get my tape machine going because it was an actual physical tape that was rolling. And on the other side was a person on the phone. I'd hang up the phone when the interview was over, and I'd listen back, and it was phone quality. Right? It was phone quality, and that was the technology that we had in the day. Unless that newsmaker was actually in studio, it was phone quality. And quite frankly, as long as I'd listen back to the interview, and if I could understand it, and it wasn't cutting out, and it wasn't a bad cell phone or something, then that audio went on the air. So you're kind of always working within yourself in terms of the standards that you expect as an individual and what you think will sound good on the air. Because if you do interview somebody and it's recorded and you listen back to the interview and this person's on a cell phone that's cutting out every 20 seconds for 2 or 3 seconds at a time, as much as you'd want to have that interview on the air, you can't air it because the listener is not going to be able to understand it, right? So you've got your own kind of checks and balances when it comes to quality control. But I think the technology inherently gives us a chance to do and have the conversation and types of conversation that we're having today because of the technology. And it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, we've been going on for a while. This is the like typical length of an episode, and I like to thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
And was it good? Was it fun?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. We talked about a number of things. Much of it music related because of our interests in music, and that was a ton of fun. Makes me want to get out there and buy that 335, but that'll have to be for another day. But it was really a joy. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Thank you for being on. And if would you be open to like being on another time later?
Sure. I'm not sure how much different or more interesting my stories or my life would be, but happy to do that.
Okay. Maybe the next time you be on, maybe it'll be a time when we can meet in person or something.
Yeah. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, guys.
Okay.
Again, thank you for being on the show. And I feel like I'm setting up a plug for you, but you don't have. You have like your podcast that you're working on.
Yes. Well, I guess we could plug that. And my blues show on WWUH Monday nights between 9 and midnight. It's virtual at this point because the station studios are still closed because of COVID. But you can tune us in online at wwuh.org, and you can join me then.
Yeah, and the title of this current podcast is.
The title of my blues show is called Blue Monday, and the title of our podcast series is called You Heart to Hartford.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Professor Hefter.
You bet. Take care.